Welcome to Beaver PRAx, a damn good podcast where we bring you inside the world of OSU and share behind-the-scenes looks at Beaver Nation. I'm Kolbie Cope, and I'm an admissions advisor based on our Corvallis campus, and thank you for joining us today. Today, joining us on the podcast, we have Peter Betjemann. Peter is the executive director of PRAx, and we are fortunate to have him on the podcast today to share his knowledge and expertise with us about this new wonderful space that we have on our campus here in Corvallis. So welcome, Peter, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
First, to start off with, would you just like to briefly introduce yourself to the listeners here? Tell us a little bit about what you do here at OSU and your association with PRAx.
Sure. I'm Peter Betjemann, and I'm the executive director of PRAx, which is short for the Patricia Valian Reser Center for the Creative Arts. Maybe later in the conversation, we can talk about what the X stands for. But I've been here at OSU since 2005, and I'm actually a professor of English originally, but been doing administrative jobs at the university for maybe 10 years and have been in my current role for the past 3 years. When I started the role as executive director of PRAx, it was a gravel lot and construction had just begun. And so my role has very much been to shape the programming and staff the building and, create the ticketing interfaces and, really get it stood up for students and for our community.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Can you tell us a little bit about what PRAx is? I know it's a relatively new building and space that we have here, and students or those listening in might not know what this space is for. So maybe a little bit of context on what the space serves, what the building does for our campus, and even for the community here. Obviously, it's a brand new space that we have just having opened in this past April, and from your experience has taken a lot of time to become what it is now. So what is PRAx? What was kind of the vision for it, and what was hoped to be achieved with its existence?
Yeah, so I'm really delighted to say that, with PRAx, OSU now has one of the premier performing and visual arts centers on the West Coast. It really is an extraordinary asset for OSU. So we're a 49,000 square foot facility that houses both visual arts and performing arts. We present a full season in both areas, by which I mean a season that runs according to the academic year from September to June. Over that period, you'll find dozens and dozens of events at PRAx. Many of these are by our incredible student artists in the School of Visual Performing and Design Arts and elsewhere. But it's really important to understand that many of the events at PRAx are by nationally and internationally renowned visiting artists. And so we work very hard to curate a series that meets the interests of the OSU community at large, and that includes staff, faculty, and students. One of the things that I mentioned before, the X in the name, it's a really important element because it signifies the aspiration of PRAx to be a cross-disciplinary and experimental art center, and also to kind of sit at the crossroads of the campus. So you could imagine, for example, a civic art center, the goal of which was to program primarily, and let's just pick a genre, say classical music or jazz music or what have you. Our goal is to present arts that interact with every discipline on campus. And so what that means in practice is that, for example, in the coming season, we have actually two dance and robotics concerts, wherein two different companies, one visiting from Taiwan, for example, Huang Yi Studio, what they present on stage includes robotics and AI components. In Wang Yi, it's actually robotics, not robotics, and AI. And in the second case, Dance Squared, you'll see more of the AI piece. So it's that kind of booking, which you don't typically see at a municipal arts center, a civic arts
Mhm.
center, that is, I think, really captures why, why we're so proud of our home at a university. It gives
Mhm.
us the chance to program in such bold and interesting ways.
For sure. Yeah, I love the whole concept behind PRAx. And also for me as an admissions advisor, it's a really exciting point to be able to share with our students, especially those that are interested in creative arts, that we have a space for you. It's very beautiful, wonderful, provides a lot of different opportunities, and that's something you're going to have access to as a student here. So for me, that's also really exciting to be able to share with our students. I'm really glad you talked about that X piece, because that was something I was really interested in, was that cross-disciplinary like mission of the PRAx building and what you're trying to accomplish. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but there's a big piece of artwork in the lobby. Is that kind of an example of that cross-disciplinary, maybe not in a performance aspect, but like characteristics of the building? Can you maybe talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's really cool.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. So there is one permanent artwork in PRAx. It is a piece that hangs in the South Lobby, as you mentioned. It's by Rafik Anadol. So Rafik Anadol is a Turkish-American data artist. And what that means is that he builds artworks that are based upon giant data sets. And so many of his works are two-dimensional. So he had a work at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, which was a flat LED panel that showed a visualization, sort of algorithmically and AI processed, of the entire digital archive of the holdings of MoMA, which is some 350,000 artworks. And we're just so lucky to have a work by Rafik here. The work here is three-dimensional, and it's one of only a couple three-dimensional works in his corpus. It is based upon 10,000 hours of recorded bird song from a project called the Pacific Northwest Bioacoustics Laboratory, which is a collaborative project of the College of Forestry and the
Mhm.
U.S. Forest Service. And so what the researchers do is they hang microphones in trees in forests in order to learn about the ecological features of the forest from the point of view of bird visitation and other elements that they pick up acoustically. What's so cool about it, these recordings, is that they collectively create, in essence, a soundscape of the forest.
Mhm.
Um, Suspended at all different levels in the canopy, et cetera. And so Rafik took the 10,000 hours and processed it in an AI. And the AI dreamt, this is language I've heard him use, dreamt up the form of this sculpture. So
Mhm.
one way to think about it is like, this is what a machine thinks about when it thinks about the soundscape of a forest.
Mhm.
And so that's what's hanging there. And then projected onto the surface of that artwork is an archive of 1.9 million images of Oregon landscapes that are also processed by a server that sits in the building. So they're abstracted. So what you don't, it's not like you can see a mountain or see a tree projected on the surface. You see
Right.
an abstraction of produced by this giant data set. And so the piece is terrifically dynamic, especially at night. I really encourage everybody to come see it after dark.
Mhm.
And I really encourage people to come see it from the second floor mezzanine space as well as from the first floor space. It looks
Mhm.
really different from every angle. The
Mhm.
last thing I'll say about it is just, great art centers famously have iconic chandeliers in their lobbies. And so the iconic chandelier in ours exists at the margins of art and science and technology, which is precisely the margin we want PRAx to sit at. So you're
Right.
absolutely right in saying it's a characteristic piece for
Yeah,
us.
I think it's really mesmerizing. I saw it for the first time a couple weeks back. We went over and toured the building, and we were all just in awe. We were on the second floor and
Yeah.
just staring at it.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to look at, and I wish and hope for the people listening. You can only do so much by just telling someone about it. You really do have to see it in person because it's just truly amazing.
Please come see it,
Yeah.
and I'll just add that there will be additional interpretive components that will be added this fall,
Oh, very cool.
including a sonic umbrella, which is a device that you stand under and you will be able to hear some of the original data, the bird song on which the
Oh,
piece is
wow. That is really awesome. I'll have to go and check that out.
great.
But speaking of like interesting characteristics and additions to the building, share a little bit about the building in itself. Obviously, there's a lot of different venues that PRAx has, and they're all used for different things. And I've also heard some stories of different characteristics of the building and why things were done a certain way. And just a lot of neat intricacies about the space that you might not know. And so maybe just share about the building itself, the different venues that are located there and what they're used for, any unique things about them.
Great. So there are 6 venues. Uh, 2 main performing arts venues, the Lynn Hallstrom Dietrich Concert Hall and the Edward J. Ray Theater. So I'll just mention about the concert hall. This is an acoustically incredible space. And so when I talk about PRAx being one of the great art centers, in my opinion, now on the West Coast, one of the things I'm referring in part to the acoustics of the space. So it has the incredible feature that it can be acoustically tuned, which means that there are 80 banners. Think of like giant roll-up shades that surround the entire circumference of the concert hall. And what comes down are banners in front of the paneling in the hall. And
Mhm.
so a hard panel is, of course, a highly reverberant surface, and a soft piece of acoustic fabric is, of course, a more absorptive surface.
Right.
So by deploying the 80 different banners at different levels and in different configurations, we can radically change the acoustics of the space. So the Lynn Hallstrom Dietrich Concert Hall is like multiple concert halls in one.
Hmm.
So for an amplified band, we'll set the acoustic very, very differently than we would, for instance, for a chamber ensemble.
Gotcha.
And what we found in the spring is just, it's such a delight to hear various genres in the space,
Hmm.
because the space can be maximized for each genre. And so the
Right.
listening experience is totally awesome. And
Hmm.
one of the things that makes me most excited about that is genres that people may not be super familiar with or comfortable with. Experimental chamber music, for example. They sound so crystalline in this space
Hmm.
that we're finding lots of people falling in love with these genres that they didn't know they would appreciate until they could really hear it in this kind of deep way. So
Right.
um, I won't go through every single venue, but just to mention the Edward J. Ray Theater, wonderful experimental space. It's a large black box theater that's very, very high tech, and can be reconfigured in all kinds of different ways. So it can be used for theatrical performances in a bunch of different audience configurations. The audience can be in the round, in other words, fully surrounding the stage, on one end of the stage, on the side of the stage, etc. It can be
Hmm.
used for immersive art installations, as we did on our opening weekend. We had a VR theater performance in there, which was incredibly powerful and moving. We'll be having a jazz club, which I can talk about it maybe later in our conversation, this coming up year. So just a super flexible space.
Right.
And the last space I'll just mention, we'll talk about maybe 3 of the 6, is the Kate and John Sturrock Art Gallery. Exhibition opening there on September 20th will be called How to Carry Water. 14 contemporary artists were invited to think about the relationship of water and watersheds to contemporary life, to patterns of social formation, to patterns that can be racialized or gendered in certain kind of ways. And so it's a meditation on rivers and bodies of water, not just as ecological spaces,
Hmm.
but as fundamentally cultural spaces.
Very cool. To add to the gallery, I know that's for external artists that you're bringing in, but is there also, if I remember correctly, a space, I don't know if it's a designated venue, but for like student
Yes.
artwork to be presented? Is that something that's like fully up and going, or is it still in the process of how does that work, or like what types of things get presented there?
That's a great question. So there, in the middle of the building, transecting the building actually is sort of laid out internally like an X.
Hmm.
The main lobby runs north to south, and there's another corridor that runs east to west that crosses it. On the east-west corridor, we think of that as the student arts corridor, and it has some really wonderful wall space and hanging art installation apparatus.
Right.
So we opened with a student graphic design exhibition there in the spring. Um, and we will have future opportunities to install student work in that space. Our curator, Ashley Stoll-Myers, is actually building an intake process wherein people interested in presenting or showing in that space can go online and make suggestions of their own work or the work of others.
Okay.
And so I'd really encourage our listeners to keep an eye out for that as we start to ramp up programming in the student art corridor.
Yeah, definitely a very cool opportunity for them to get their work out there and get some eyes on it. Definitely a great opportunity for our students. I know, briefly, if you can just share on a couple, I know there's a couple of like outdoor venues,
Mhm.
outside of more of like a performing space, but also the garden, I think is really neat, and some of the design reasonings for that more so. Like it's a neat place to just walk through, but also I think there's a lot of interesting story behind why it was designed the way that it was designed. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Sure, that's the Dixie Luana Wooten Kenny Garden. Um, we call it Dixie's Garden for short. It is really, it's been so interesting to watch it evolve from the time it was installed in the late winter
Mhm.
through the summer. It's built around 6 different ecozones that are common in Oregon, including one of which is devoted to indigenous plantings and culture and contains such plantings as camas, which was, of course, highly important to indigenous communities in the Willamette
Mhm.
Valley. So it is really designed as a kind of demonstration garden. Um, there is, for example, an Oregon agricultural area, and that one is probably the most noticeable because there are giant metal poles
Mhm.
at the south end of the garden that are the armature for hops. And so hops is growing up and forming what the landscape architect calls a hops sculpture. And at the base of those poles, we've installed 3 hammocks. And so it's a place for gathering, a place for reflection, a place for relaxation. The garden is laid out with a pathway that was inspired by a LiDAR image of the Willamette River. So the concept is that in walking through the garden, you're both tracing a kind of riverway, but you're also strolling through the environments and culture of Oregon.
That's really wonderful. I love how intentional all of the decisions are with the building, from the landscape outside to the venues that are offered within PRAx. It's just amazing how much time and thought was put into that space, and the benefits that it has for our students. You talked in the beginning a little bit about the PRAx season and the events that are hosted. You know, there's all these different events that are hosted throughout the school year. With the school year, about to start, and the PRAx season about to start as well, can you maybe share some highlights? Obviously, I'm sure all of the events that are happening are all amazing, and if students can, they should try to make some. But what are some like highlights of events that are going on at PRAx this year that you might encourage students to come and check out?
Absolutely. And let me just say right away when we talk about that, student tickets at PRAx are always $5. This is a commitment we're really proud of. We're grateful for the support from OSU
Mhm.
to help make this possible. Um, and just to give you a sense, our Patricia Valian Reser Artist in Residence for the coming year is Esperanza Spalding. One of the really, really towering figures in contemporary jazz, and actually crossing over into multiple genres, five-time Grammy winner. And so tickets to the two concerts that Esperanza Spalding will be presenting in April for the general public are $45 to $75.
Oh, wow.
Those concerts too are $5 for students. And
Wow.
so the real commitment to accessibility for students
Yeah.
is something I really want to stress. And we
Yeah.
can talk about how students get tickets in a second. But
Yeah.
when we look ahead to the 24-25 season, a few notable concepts for me. So students who are interested in dance, we are branching out into dance in 24-25. We haven't yet done dance in the space, but Huang Yi and Kuka, which I talked about earlier, the dance company that includes a large robot as a member of the company.
Mhm.
Push Fold Dance Company is doing a really remarkable, very intimate piece in the Edward J. Ray Theater called Early, which is a short 40-minute work that involves sort of themes of primordial being and becoming. So I'd really encourage people to take a look at the extended series of dance programming. There's more than I just mentioned as
Yeah.
well. I would love to draw attention to a performance in January by Villalobos Brothers. This is an ensemble from Veracruz, Mexico, that are classically trained strings players who play music inspired and drawn from folk idioms of Veracruz in a larger ensemble other than the three brothers who are the kind of front men of the band. There's additional members of the ensemble as well.
Mhm.
They are very high energy, incredibly interesting, and just totally full of life.
Mhm.
In the late spring, we'll have Dobe Nahore, who is an Afro pop
Ooh.
really star from Cote d'Ivoire.
Mhm.
She sings in multiple languages, 7 or 9, I
Wow.
believe. And that concert will be, I think, another one that's just super full of energy. And for all of our concerts, so there's 24 PRAx Presents concerts. So those
Okay.
would be by visiting professional artists.
Uh-huh.
You can find information about all of the concerts at prax.oregonstate.edu. Keep an eye out for our engagement opportunities as well. So what that means is when we bring a visiting artist, we always ask them to do engagements with the student community. Dobe Nohore, for example, will be doing a dance workshop open to people at all skill levels.
Oh, very cool.
Really, really fun. We'll have master classes. We've had cooking classes. We've had all kinds of opportunities for students to engage, panel
Mhm.
discussions, and the like for almost all of our artists. So keep an eye
Right.
out for those as well.
Yeah, very exciting. Yeah, could you touch on a little bit of how students obtain tickets? And with that, is this also an opportunity for, obviously, we have a second campus over in Bend, Oregon, or OSU Cascades. Are those students also eligible for that $5 student discount? And is it the same process when they
Yes,
reserve tickets or, okay.
yes, absolutely. And so very simple. You just go to prax.oregonstate.edu and you click on our events listing. And when you select an event, and hit purchase tickets, there will be a $5 student option. And
Okay.
students simply need to select that option, and the ticket will be digitally issued.
Mhm.
The other thing I would note is that we also have a free option for students. So they're on performance days. If a show is not sold out, we run what we call a student rush. So starting at noon on a performance day, if you walk into the box office in person, box office is at the north end of PRAx, so easiest way is through the north entrance, but you can get in anyway. If you walk into the box office and show a student ID, we will simply hand you a ticket if there are any tickets remaining. So what I really encourage students to do, if there's something you really, really want to see, I would recommend buying the $5 student ticket now so that you don't lose that opportunity.
Right.
If on a random Thursday or Friday or Saturday, you're looking for something to do, you didn't necessarily think it would be an arts weekend for you, but something catches your eye, just walk in, get a ticket, and come on into the venue.
Awesome. Kind of to backtrack a little bit with the season of PRAx, you said 24 different events that will happen throughout the year, and those are all external, like you're bringing people in to perform. Within that time, there's also going to be performances from like ensembles here at OSU, right? So,
Absolutely.
like,
Thank you
okay.
for clarifying. And sometimes I pass over this too quickly. 24 PRAx presents events.
Okay.
So when an event is described as something presented by PRAx, that means that we have brought in an outside professional artist.
Gotcha.
There's one other series I want to talk about actually in a second. But we also have what we call our student arts season. And so that's the last 4 weeks of each term. And in the student arts season, we present work by musical ensembles, student musical ensembles, by university theater, their main stage productions. And so jazz ensemble, wind ensemble, the choirs, percussion ensemble, guitar ensemble, and then as I mentioned, those university theater main stage shows, which have a very long and very wonderful tradition of engaging lots of members of the campus community. Those will also be presented in PRAx. So tickets for students to student art season events are always free.
Okay.
And so would really encourage for on the musical side, there's a $5 ticket on the theatrical side. Would really love to see students coming out supporting their peers who are really the artists of the future. You know, the way we think about it is the first 6 weeks of each term, we're presenting the artists who have arrived on the world stage. And in the next 4 weeks, we're presenting the artists of the future who are someday going to be those headliners at other art centers.
Right. Yeah, I'm really glad we were able to touch on that because I think it's important for the students to know that this is also a space for you that's available on our campus and that you will get to utilize in addition to all of the wonderful external artists that you all are bringing into the space as well. But I know there are a couple of topics you had mentioned you maybe want to circle back to. So is there anything else that came up that you want to share that we hadn't talked about or other exciting things that you want to share with our listeners?
Well, thanks for that opportunity. I did recognize, yeah, it's true. I did recognize that there was something I'd meant to say that I didn't. So we have a really exciting series in 24-25 called the Indigenous Jazz Club. And so we opened the center with really an amazing performance by Indigenous jazz musicians who are really pushing the envelope of the genre of jazz in some really exciting ways. And so there's a series curated by one of those artists named Julia Keefe, who is a jazz vocalist and runs an ensemble called Julia Keefe's Indigenous Big Band. Comprised of entirely Indigenous musicians. They recently performed actually with Esperanza Spalding at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. To really wonderful critical acclaim. So Julia chooses who comes to PRAx for the Indigenous Jazz Club events. For example, in the fall, our kickoff Indigenous Jazz Club event will be Molly Obamsawin, who's an amazing bass player who plays a kind of free jazz style. And one of the reasons I really wanted to draw attention to that series is that it offers a late night opportunity. So we're
Okay.
running it very much like a jazz club in New York or in LA, where there are two different sets that are separately ticketed. So the first set is at 7 p.m. and the second set is at 9 p.m. And so each set is an hour. And so for a drop-in kind of nightlife taste of some of really the best jazz in the nation and the world, I'd
Yeah.
love to see students there. Also, keep your eye out. We have some exciting opportunities for other night events, including an EDM series in
Oh,
the
very cool.
Black Box that we're going to be running. Those aren't up on the website yet because they're a little bit more kind of impromptu, but we'll announce them at least with a month prior to the performance. So basically always keep your eye on
Yeah.
prax.org.edu. And please, we'd love to have students sign up for our mailings. You can do that on the website if you want to be sure that you're getting the absolute most up-to-date info.
Yeah, lots of exciting things happening. Any last minute things you want to share before we wrap things up?
Just thank you for the opportunity. And
Yes.
the last thing I would share is that it's an amazing moment for the arts at OSU.
Mhm.
Um, it really is. The first art center at OSU was proposed in the early 20th century. So we've
Wow.
been, in essence, waiting over 100 years
Yeah.
for a space like this.
Hmm.
And one of the things we've recognized is that it was worth the wait.
Yeah.
If we had built an art center 30 years ago, we would not have had the ability to build a center as architecturally, acoustically, and
Right.
artistically advanced as this.
Hmm.
And so, what a resource. I
Yeah.
just hope every OSU student comes to visit this year.
Yeah.
And really, it becomes a core part of being an OSU student is
Hmm.
having access to this space and programming.
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely attest to just the beauty of the space and how awesome it is to have it here on our campus, especially being in Kerr Admin Building right next to PRAx and seeing how it's developed over the time that I've been here. It's just been amazing. And then I got to actually see the inside of it for the first time just a few weeks ago. So although it's really great to listen to this and learn about the building, I also would highly encourage students to go and check it out because it's really amazing. But thank you, Peter, for being here. I appreciate the time that you've spent to share your knowledge with us. And to those listening in, thank you for joining us as well. We hope you can join us on our next episode of Beaver Tracks. It'll be a damn good time.